That's the thing that separates every entrepreneur from every other entrepreneur, is that when we look at each other's pricing and we want to compare ourselves, we don't know what their business plan is. We don't know what their bills are. All we can know is our strategy. Hey everybody, Adam Mason here. Thank you so much for tuning into the Bearded Tog Podcast. If you've made it to this episode, it means so much to me that you're even listening. I want to give everybody value, and the goal of the Bearded Tog is to dive into what it takes to run a successful business and help each other reach our business and life goals. So if you're into that, thank you so much for joining. Let's get started. So we're in the series of pricing yourself for long-term success, which is something I think in the beginning of when you're starting your business is super difficult because you're not sure how you should price yourself. You're not sure how much money you should want. You kind of feel guilty if you feel like you want a lot of money for what you do. You may not have paid your dues or anything like that. And so I want to help people kind of get a pricing strategy down that helps serve you for the long term, because long term is the goal. You want your business to be successful. So when it comes to pricing yourself for long-term success, similar to what we talked about last week, to recap, is the cost of business, what we talked about last week, cost of the job, and cost of your time. So for the cost of business, that is how much your business costs over a year to run. So for some of you, that's $1,000. For some people, that's $100,000. The cost of the job, which we'll talk about today, is how much that specific gig or client costs you to do. Whether you had a rental piece of gear or you had meals or employees, that's what we're going to talk about today. And the next episode is going to be the cost of your time. And that's going to shift based on how much experience you have. How big is the client? Is it Pepsi versus your next door neighbor? Maybe your next door neighbor works for Pepsi. That's complicated. Anyway, so that's what we're talking about next week, is the cost of time. And so all of that equals what you should charge. Got it? Awesome. When you're talking to anybody that knows business, or maybe they have their MBA or they've taken an economics class, they're going to call these the variable costs. And obviously that just means that these costs are the ones that are going to change based on what type of project you're doing. So in the photography world, that means the difference between shooting a family session or a portrait session or shooting a wedding or shooting commercial images for a client campaign. Those are all priced very differently. For a lot of folks, they might not think that they have any variable costs because they own all their gear and they think, I just show up, shoot, deliver the photos on my computer, and we're good to go. But honestly, that's not the case. And obviously, if we look at the cost of our business, hopefully that was surprising. And we saw that, we have to pay that money over time. And so our jobs are how we actually get there. And so those clients, we have to know how much money we're making per client, and also how much money is going towards our business goals. So for a lot of people in the photography industry, the cost of the job would be kind of more tangible things. The first thing is obviously travel. Did you have to drive or metro or fly to get there? Even if it's just a mile, even if it's just 2 miles. One, if you're paying taxes with the IRS, they need to know your mileage. If you need any app suggestions, we'll talk about that in another episode for tracking your mileage. But also, two, you can get a tax return based on your travel. So I think every state kind of has like a mileage minimum, and those minimums help determine how much money you'll get back on your state tax return. So whether you flew or whether you walked or whether you drove, try and figure out what it costs to travel. So a lot of times that can be tolls, that can be gas money, that can be an oil change if you got it along the way, whatever it costs to make this thing happen. Sometimes for me, it gets kind of quirky because I'll rent a car for certain gigs, or I'll rent a van if I need to house a lot of gear and I'm going to some kind of off-site shoot. And it's really an expense that I didn't plan for, or I don't necessarily own a van. And so renting a van is always kind of included in that cost. This is also too a good time to note that all of these costs will help you even just determine how much you should charge the client. One, you have a cost of business. And so that's really important. When you have the cost of your business, that's the thing that separates every entrepreneur from every other entrepreneur, is that when we look at each other's pricing and we want to compare ourselves, we don't know what their business plan is. We don't know what their bills are. We don't know kind of their strategy. All we can know is our strategy. And so for us, whether we're charging less and we feel like we're doing all right and we're making more, or if we're charging more and that works for our family and where we're at and our location and our time, that's all that matters. Don't compare yourself to other people's pricing. The second thing after travel that I think about when it comes to variable costs is, did you rent any gear? And so a lot of times when I used to rent gear back in college, when I was starting out, I would try and rent gear for a particular client, and it would cost, X amount of dollars, and I would have the client pay for that. And then in addition, I might try and book like a friend shoot, for free or something like that, because a lot of times the rental would come for 2 or 3 days, and I would have this, a lens or a camera body for extra time, and it would just sit there. I wouldn't be doing anything with it. So I would use that gear for other gigs that were maybe free, or maybe they helped build my skill level or my portfolio, just so I could get more out of my rental. If you want to be able to put a price on that, you totally can. But I think too, that helped kind of alleviate the mindset of renting gear. Another thing specific to photographers most of the time is, are you creating any products? So a lot of photographers still do prints, or they do albums. How much do those cost your business? And also, hopefully you're pricing those products to have some profit for you to pay for your business, but also too, just how much does it cost your time to make those products? We'll get into that in the next episode. But then also too, what's the tangible price of those products? In addition, when I do wedding photography, I have thank you gifts. I have a few date night gifts that I give throughout the wedding process. And those don't cost me a lot of money per se. But if you buy $10 Starbucks cards at once, because you're going to give them to 10 different clients, that's $100. And so it's good to know what cost each card goes to which client, and kind of making sure that each job, the cost individual to that. The next thing is honestly food. Everybody has to eat. And you can approach this however you would like, whether you make snacks out of your regular grocery budget or whatever when you take the shoots, or if you're traveling over the course of a few days, that's really difficult to do. So you should throw all of that into the cost of that particular job. And so for some jobs, that's going to cost you nothing because you won't eat during the shoot. You'll have lunch before and say it's like a 2-hour family session. And then you'll come home, have dinner, and you're good to go. But for some people, that's not the same case, or a lot of times for my shoots, I'll take my clients out. I know a lot of times for me, what I'll do after a engagement session or after a family session, I'll do my best to at least go out for coffee, or at least go out for part of a meal, or maybe like an appetizer or something like that, just to get to know my clients. And that's my personal own workflow, but that costs me money, and that goes into the cost of my job. And so I always try and consider that, which is why I don't really take my clients out to any fancy restaurants. Sorry, clients, if you're listening to this. Hope Starbucks was good. Anyway, so those are some examples when it comes to figuring out the cost of that particular job. So again, renting gear, travel, meals, products, maybe they're just job supplies, where you have to buy gaff tape or something like that, or even office supplies. If you have to buy paper clips for this particular client, you need to make sure that it goes under that client, even if you get to use the paper clips another time. Just to recap really quickly. So we're calculating the cost of our job, of our particular client gig to take care of, and all the costs that go into that. Not the cost of our business and not the cost of our time, just the tangible costs from this particular job. So that's travel, again, meals, job supplies, like you bought gaff tape or something like that for a particular job, any rental gear, stuff like that, products. Are you making albums? Are you printing photos? Are you giving them frames? Are you giving them a free copy of something? Do you have a thumb drive that you deliver your photos on? Even a CD or DVD? Things like that are going to be tangible costs tied to that particular client. And so last episode, we had cost of business, which is how much it costs to run your business over the year. This time, it's cost of the particular job, which this hopefully pays for that cost of the business when you figure out how much you need to charge extra profit after that. And then next week, we'll talk about the cost of your time, which is the most relative thing, and it's the most fun, I think, for me. So thanks so much for listening. If you have any questions, feel free to hit me up on email, thebeardedtog@gmail.com, or hit us up on Twitter @thebeardedtog. Thank you so much for listening. You matter. You can do this. Keep going. Thank you so much, guys.